Kia ora, hello, namaste, ni hao. This is Prashant and we shall be continuing with our Fortinet series of labs and discussions. The video has been created for you to understand the basics of intrusion protection system against denial of service attacks. This is lab 11 in the Fortinet Security Guide Operating System 6.2 series, and the details of these labs are mentioned on page 182 in the guide and beyond. The video will cover the IPS and denial of service basics. IPS stands for Intrusion Prevention System, and how a FortiGate protects your organization when you're using these devices. It will assist you in better understanding this lab. The VMs you would be using during this lab are the Linux, the FortiManager, local FortiGate, and local Windows. In this lesson, you would learn how to use the FortiGate to protect your network against intrusions and denial of service, and the activities are all oriented towards that. If you have read the instructions in the guide and you've watched the video, it should take you approximately 40 minutes to complete this lab. There are 3 questions which are already been uploaded to Moodle, and you would need to upload one document to ensure that you have completed this particular experiment. Now, an important thing that you need to remember, especially when you're using the virtual instance of the labs, is that you have to first restore the local FortiGate with the necessary initial configuration files. So on the local Windows VM desktop, you have to go to the local FortiGate, open the local FortiGate, and from there restore the initial lab environment, which is within the resources folder, and then start the lab. It will prevent you from having any kind of problems of networking. Sometimes you may experience if you're using the virtual lab. Now this file will reset all firewall conditions and you will not have a problem in the network if you configure this, of course, based on the instructions. While doing the lab, the local FortiGate config files are again back located where it normally is. So before your lab starts, you should restore the original file and then continue with the lab. After completing this lab, you should be able to achieve the objectives shown on the slide by demonstrating competence in intrusion prevention systems. You should be able to implement an effective IPS solution to protect your network if you get the opportunity to handle various FortiGate devices. Primarily, you should be able to differentiate between what an exploit and what an anomaly would be. You would also be able to understand the different components of an IPS package and what it means. You could then use how do you manage the FortiGuard IPS updates. Then you can select an IPS signature update, configure the IPS sensor, identify the IPS sensor inspection sequence, and then finally apply the IPS to network traffic. Now you would be doing all these things in various segments of this particular lab. Why would you use an IPS? Now, organizations are under continuous attack. We've discussed this in the past. Cyber criminals motivated by previous successful high-profile hacks and a highly profitable black market for stolen data continue to increase both the volume and sophistication of their attacks on organizations. Now, if you recollect, we discussed at length what the monetization cycle for the hack looked like in an earlier lesson. You remember we had shown how each member of the entire cycle used the data to monetize it. Now, many organizations also encourage BYOD, bring your own device, and flexible working environment. Now, you are living in exactly that environment at the moment. This has led to explosion of anytime, anywhere data consumption. Now, the consumption increases the risk that sensitive data will be exposed to unauthorized access outside the business boundaries. Now, today's threat landscape requires that the intrusion prevention system block a wide range of threats while minimizing false positive. So in such a scenario, it's very important for us to have the wherewithal to implement an IPS system within a device. It is important for us to understand what is the difference between an exploit and an anomaly. Now, It's also important to know which FortiGate feature offers protection against each of these type of threats. Remember, an anomaly as well as an exploit are both threats to any system. Now, exploits are known attacks with known patterns that can be matched by maybe an intrusion prevention system or antivirus signature, etc. It could be one of the known exploits that have already been in the know-how of people who are managing networks for a while. Now, anomaly are usually behaviors, on the other hand, in the network, such as higher than usual CPU usage or a zero-day denial of service attack. Now, anomalies must be detected and monitored, and in some cases blocked or mitigated, because they can be the symptoms of a new, never seen before attack. Anomalies are usually better detected by behavioral analysis, such as rate-based IPS signatures or denial of service policies and protocol constraint inspections. Now, these are specific things that we will discuss slightly later in this presentation. But one of the things that we will be experiencing and using will be an abnormally high rate of traffic. Let's say there's a denial of service attack or a flood attack that is happening on a network. How do you stop it? So the lab, you will actually be doing this. IPS on FortiGate uses signature databases to detect known attacks. Now, if there's an attack, it will most likely be in the database of FortiGate, and FortiGate is going to use that database to detect incoming traffic. Now, protocol detectors or protocol decoders can also detect network traffic and protocol anomalies. Now, the IPS engine is responsible for most of the features shown in the lab. This is IPS and protocol decoders. It is also responsible for application control, flow-based antivirus protection, web filtering, email filtering, and flow-based DLP in a one-arm sniffer mode. Now remember, we did a one-arm sniffer mode where there was the FortiGate itself was acting as a sniffer on the traffic flowing. Now you have already used some of these features in previous labs, so you can perhaps relate to them. We did do a little bit about a data leak prevention in one of our lessons, also in one of the labs. What are protocol decoders now? And how does the IPS engine determine if a packet contains an attack or an anomaly? Now, protocol decoders parse each packet according to the protocol specifications. Some protocol decoders require a port number specification, which can be configured in CLI or command line interface, but usually the protocol is automatically detected because the firewall device or those devices have already been synchronized with the INA standard ports. If the traffic doesn't conform to the specification, if for example it sends malformed or invalid commands to your server, then the protocol decoder detects the error and stops the traffic from flowing towards your network. Now, how do the FortiGuard IPS updates happen? By default, an initial set of intrusion prevention system signature is included in each FortiGate firmware release. FortiGuard updates the IPS signature database with new signatures. That way, the IPS remains effective against new exploits. Now, if you recollect, we had discussed that there were several organizations like Cisco, it has Talus, and Checkpoint, it has Checkpoint Security Fabric, etc., which all collate these signatures as they happen the world over, and they all pool it together into one instance. In this case, FortiGuard does that for the Fortinet series of devices. Now, unless a protocol specification or a RFC change happens, which doesn't happen very often, protocol decoders are rarely updated. The IPS engine itself changes most frequently, but still not often. Now, starting with FortiOS 6.2, the one which you are on is the latest one, botnet IPs and domain databases have now moved from the antivirus license to the IPS license contract. Good for you to know if you ever deal with the licensing part. Your VMs and devices are already loaded with these features. If you go onto your dashboard, you will see that your licenses are valid. Very expensive licenses, by the way. Each of them cost about $4,000. So when I keep telling you that you guys are having almost about $17,000 or $18,000 worth of a firewall on your device, I'm not kidding. Have a look at your own databases. Now, for those of you who did complete the Security Fabric Lab, you would have seen the device security rating, which can be improved when you uploaded the specific IPS and antivirus signatures. Now, FortiGuard IPS services update the IPS signatures very often. The FortiGuard research team identifies and builds new signature just like antivirus signature. So if your FortiGuard service contract expires, you can still use the IPS. However, just like antivirus scans, the IPS scans will become increasingly ineffective the longer your signatures go without being updated. Now, old signatures really won't defend you against new attacks. Now, how do you choose the signature database? The IPS signature database is primarily divided into regular and extended databases. The regular signature database contains signature for common attacks whose signature cause rare or no false positives. It's a smaller database and its default action is to block the detected attack. Now, the extended signature database contains additional signatures for attacks that cause a significant performance impact on the device or don't support blocking because of their nature. In fact, because of its size, the extended database is not available for FortiGuard models with a smaller disk or RAM. But for high security networks, you might be required to enable the extended signatures database. For our case, we have downloaded the extended signature database. However, we have not enabled it because it makes the network pretty slow. Now, after FortiGate downloads the FortiGuard IPS package, new signature appear in the signature list. You can have a look at that, how it looks like, and you will be doing a part of this particular thing in your lab as well. When configuring the FortiGate, you can change the action setting on each sensor that uses a signature. The default action setting is often correct, except for the following cases. Your software vendor releases a security patch. Now, let's say Windows releases a security patch and that doesn't really work with it, so you can actually block it. Your network has a custom application with traffic that inadvertently triggers an IPS signature. So you may have a custom app that's working and it's interfering. So you can disable the settings until you notify Fortinet so that the FortiGuard team can modify the signature to avoid false positive. Especially those of you who are working with, you work on creating new applications, you need to be careful if you have a Fortinet device. You will have to, if your device uses certain ports that can interfere with the firewall functioning, you may need to go back to the FortiGuard team and tell them, hey, we're using this, can you please change it? Although we will not be testing this in our lab, it's worthwhile to know the feature. Now, how do you configure the IPS signatures or IPS sensors? Sorry. Now, there are two ways to add predefined signatures to an IPS sensor. One way is to select the signature individually. After you select the signature in the list, the signature is added to the sensor with its default action. Then you can right click the signature and change the action. So I've given these things on the slide. You will be doing part of this because the step-by-step process is actually given there. The second way is to add a signature to a sensor is by using filters. FortiGate will add all the signatures that match that particular filter. You can see the total that comes about if you look at the severity levels. Let's say if you want severity levels of high, you will see all the signatures that are actually there in your firewall. You can also add rate-based signatures to block specific traffic when the threshold is exceeded during the configured time period. You should apply rate-based signatures only to protocols you actually use. Then configure the block duration to block malicious clients from extended periods. This saves time, resources, and can discourage a repeat attack. Now, FortiGate does not track statistics for that client while it is temporarily blacklisted. You will be testing both these features during the upcoming lab. Now, when the IPS engine compares traffic with the signatures on each filter, order matters. Remember, even for firewall policies, the order used to matter. Whichever is higher, that particular policy is going to be in place. The rules are similar to firewall policy matching. The engine evaluates the filter on the top of the list first, then applies the first match. The engine skips all subsequent filters. So position the most likely matching filter or signature at the top of the list. Avoid making too many filters because this increases evaluation and CPU usage. Also avoid making very large signature groups in each filter, which increases the RAM usage and kind of slows down your network. In the event of a false positive outbreak, you can add the triggered signature as an individual signature and send the action to monitor. This will allow you to monitor the signature event using IPS logs while investigating any false positive issues. Sometimes it is necessary to exempt certain source or destination IP addresses from specific signatures. Now, this feature is useful during false positive outbreaks. You can temporarily bypass affected endpoints until you investigate the correct false positive issue. You can configure the IP exemption on individual signatures only. Each signature can have multiple exemptions. We would not be doing this in the lab, but it's good for you to know. Now, what are the IPS actions are after you select the filter of signature, you would like to add certain actions to each of the signatures you've done. So you can right click the filter or signature and then select the action. You select pass to allow traffic to continue to its destination. You select monitor to allow traffic to continue to its destination and log the activity. You select block to silently drop traffic matching any of the signatures included in the filter. You select reset to generate the TCP RST or reset packet whenever the signature is triggered, and you select quarantine. It allows you to quarantine the attacker's IP address for a set duration. You can set the quarantine duration to any number of days, hours, or minute. Now you should carefully look at these options because you would be using these as part of your lab today and important from an exam point of view. If you select packet logging, Fortinet saves a copy of the packet that matches the signature. Enabling botnet protection is another feature of the Fortinet devices. Since the botnet database is part of the FortiGuard intrusion prevention system contract, users with administrative accounts, remember it's only with administrative accounts, enable scanning of botnet connections to maximize their internal security. You enable botnet scanning to the IPS profile that you applied the firewall policy on. You can also enable scanning of botnet connections using the command line interface. There are three possible actions for botnet and command and control CNC networks. Disable, that means you do not scan connections to botnet servers. Block connection to botnet servers, and monitor, where you log connection to the botnet servers. Now, in terms of to apply the IPS inspection, you must enable the IPS and then select the sensor in a firewall policy. By default, FortiGate logs all security events. This means that you can see any traffic that has been blocked by the IPS. You would need to show me how the traffic is being logged as one of the questions. If you think some traffic should be blocked but is passing through the policy, you should change the log allowed traffic method to all sessions. This will log all traffic processed by that firewall policy and not just the traffic that is blocked by the security profiles. This will help you in identifying false negative events. If you have enabled the security event logging in the firewall policies that apply the intrusion prevention system, you can view IPS events by clicking login reports, intrusion prevention, and the intrusion prevention log menu appears only if FortiGate has matched attack attempts with the IPS signature. If nothing is available there, I would very comfortably assume that you've done something wrong in the way you've done the lab. You should review the IPS logs frequently. The logs are an invaluable source of information about the kind of attacks that are being targeted at your network. This will help you to develop action plans and focus on specific events. For example, patching a critical vulnerability. Now let's quickly knowledge check. Now let's have a look. Which one of the following items is evaluated first in an IPS signature or sensor? And which IPS component is updated most frequently, right? So we'll discuss the answers to this in our face-to-face session. Thank you, and now you guys can start with your lab, and all the best.